everyone, welcome. I'm Paul Lefevre, the Xojo developer evangelist, and this time I'll be talking to you about the Web QuickStart. So today I'm going to give a quick demonstration of Xojo and show you how you can make a very simple web app. If you like to follow along, you can view the quick start in the documentation at this address. And let's jump right into Xojo. So when you start Xojo, you get the project chooser. You can see there's a variety of project types to choose from, and this being the web quick start, we're going to go with web. And our simple project is going to play YouTube videos. So we can just call it YouTube Player. The company name can be whatever you want, of course, and the application identifier is typically based off the company name in reverse domain name kind of thing. This is useful for if you're deploying CGI applications. This is a kind of a unique identifier to make sure all the multiple web apps on a server can be distinct. So then you can click OK to start Xojo proper. And then here you get the main Xojo IDE, and I'll make that a bit bigger. And this part is what we call the workspace, because it's where you're going to do all your work, really. And you can see the main areas of the workspace. You've got a toolbar at the top with commonly used functions, including the insert button, which is how you can add new things to your project. Also available on the insert menu. And then you've got the run button to do testing of your project. The deploy button lets you deploy to Xojo Cloud if you wish. And then here on the right, you've got the library and inspector to switch this right-hand side between the library, which is what you're seeing now with all the available controls, and the inspector, which is where you can adjust properties for whatever happens to be selected. On the left is the navigator that shows you everything that's in your project. Right now, we just have the default items, so the initial app object, a session object, and then the web page itself, which is what is selected right now. And speaking of the web page, in the center area here, the editing area, this varies depending on what you have selected in the navigator. Since we have a web page selected, we are looking at the web page layout editor. So here it shows you right now kind of a blank page, so to speak, and we can do some designing here and drag some controls onto it. So our little YouTube app is only going to use 3 controls. We'll have a text field to type in a YouTube video ID. We'll have a button to click that will load that video, and then we'll have a YouTube player control that will actually be where the YouTube video is played. So you can see here in the library, you get various controls. If you don't recognize them by their picture, you can change the way things are displayed. So we could turn on labels. We could turn on small icons and labels if you'd rather have them like that. So whatever works for you. This way has nice pictures, and you can easily see quite a few of them. So the text field is right here. So I can just click on that and drag that over and position it where I want. You'll see as I move it, these lines appear. Those are called the layout guides, and they can help you make sure things are lined up the way you want. And then you can use the handles to resize things how you want. I'm also going to drag a button over and also position it kind of on the right-hand side here. And then I'll tweak this so it's closer to the button. So pretty easy there. And then the next control I want is the YouTube player control, which is right here. And I can just drag that in and also line it up so it's lined up on the left and the right to match those things there. So I have an initial design here of how I want my user interface to look, and that's great. And now we can tweak it a bit to make it work the way we want. So what we're going to do now is start by tweaking some of the properties of these various things. So the first thing we're going to do here is I'm going to click here on the background, and that's going to select the window, because that'll be the first thing that we want to change properties for. And then I'm going to click up here to display the inspector. And this now shows the properties for what happens to be selected. And in this case, it's the window itself. So looking at this, you can see there's not too many properties of the web page. But a couple we'll want to change is we can change the page name itself. Web page 1 is not a super descriptive name. And it's a good habit to give things nice names, because as your projects get bigger and you work on things, it's easier to find stuff and remember what they're used for if they actually have a name that reflects that rather than just a generic name. So changing this name to player page is a good idea. And you can see when you do that, the navigator immediately updates to also indicate its new name. And then also you can see there's a title for the web page, which we can change. And when we do that, it also updates in the little preview here so you can see what it might look like. Most web browsers today have lots of tabs. Typically, the title would be what you'd see in the tab, but if you tend to have a lot of tabs open like I do, it might get scrunched. But still, you do want to have your pages nicely named so users can recognize which one's which. So these are the only properties you want to change for the web page itself. But each of the controls that we did add to the page are going to want their properties also tweaked. So now we can start with the text field. So I can click on that, and you can see it has quite a bit of properties. And we'll start at the top here with the name. As I mentioned, a generic name like text field 1 isn't super clear. If you write code against that, you might not remember what its purpose was. So we're going to give it a name kind of defining what it is here. So this is where the user is going to type in an ID for a video, a YouTube video. So I can just call that ID field. You can have your own naming convention, of course. You don't have to use anything specific. I tend to use some sort of suffix on the names to help me remember what kind of control they were. Going down through the properties, you can see here this section called locking. It has this graphical view. And this controls, no pun intended, how the control size changes as the size of the page changes. So in this case, you can see the control is locked to the left and the right. So that essentially means it's just not going to move. It's going to stay locked in this left-hand corner. But as the web page gets bigger, it would be nice, perhaps, if the text field itself also stretched over to the right. So we can lock it to the right-hand side, and then it will do that. And we really don't need to change any of the other properties for the text field. So we can move on to the button. So this button is what you're going to click. It'll take whatever happens to be entered as the ID and use it to display a video down here. So again, we want to give the button a nice name. And you can be long with your description names. You don't have to be brief, as long as you don't mind typing. So again, I changed the name here. And you can see when you tweak these, the names show up in the navigator, which again is helpful for referring to things. Also, the locking can be something you want to adjust. You can see this is also just locked to the top left and right. But we don't really want that. We kind of want this button to just stay attached to the right-hand side of the web page. So we can unlock it from the left and instead just lock it to the right. So now when the page gets bigger, so if it grows this way, the button will stay on the right-hand side, and that'll allow the text field to move over without overlapping it, which is nice because otherwise that would look messy. And then the last thing, the button still says untitled up here, which is not real helpful to the user to know what's going to happen. So we can put some text in here in the caption. And you can see again that updates the user interface directly. And the last thing that needs property changes is the YouTube controller itself. So again, we can change the name here. The locking, this is the primary control. It's going to use up most of the space on the page, so we can lock it to the entire page. So we'll lock it to the right and the bottom and the whole thing. So it will get bigger as the page size changes. And you can demonstrate that if you click outside in the blank area here so that the window itself gets selected. You can actually resize the window. And now you can see, because I set the locking up, that as I'm changing the window, the controls are moving according to the lockings. And everything stays the way we want, which is good. So that's pretty much it for what we want for the design or the look and feel of the app. So now we'll just need to add some code to actually make it do something. Now, obviously, this being a super simple app, the code is also going to be super simple. And in this case, as I've mentioned before, what's going to happen is the user will type a video ID here, click the load video button, and that video will play down here. So the only place that we're going to need code is in the button, so that when the user clicks or taps on the button, it will run some code to do those steps that I described, get the ID, and then use that ID to display the video down here. So I can click on the button. And if I look at the command bar up here, there's lots of options available, mostly for positioning and whatnot. But this one here, the add button, is going to be a drop down, and this actually lets you add things to the web page as a whole. But one thing you can add to the selected control is an event handler. Because when the user interacts with controls, that generally is going to trigger events of some kind. And so you can choose the event handler to see what events are triggered. And in this case, quite a few. And the action event is the one we care about. It's the one that's selected by default, also first because it starts with A, which is convenient. And this is the event that will be called when the button is clicked. So we want that one, so we'll leave that selected. We click OK here. And now the layout area changes. The user interface layout of our web page is replaced with the code editor for the action event of the load video button, which you can kind of see represented here in the navigator by the action event being under the load video button. So now we need code to actually display the video. And we can do this a variety of ways, but we can actually do it in one line, which we'll do here since it's one line of code. So because we gave everything nice names, we can refer to them by their names. And as you can see, as I start to type, the autocomplete will try to guess at what you're attempting to do and give you some options here. So I just typed Y, and it automatically filled in YouTube player. And if I want that, and I do because that's the YouTube player control here, I can just press the tab key and it'll essentially type the rest in for me. And what I want to do on the YouTube player is set the URL of the video to display. So I can put the dot here and I can start typing. And I know I want the URL property, but if I didn't, I could, well, actually, since URL is the only property that starts with U, that's the one that'll fill in. But if I just press tab after I type the period, you can see a list of all the properties that are available. And you can see that URL is down here. It's got a little icon indicating it's a string. If I hover the mouse over that, you can see down on the bottom, it also gives you a short description of the particular property that you type. So here I want to set that property to be a specific URL. And that's one to YouTube. And their syntax for playing a video using an ID is this. So you use the youtube.com main domain, and then you provide a watch path, and then pass in the parameter with the video ID, so with using $V. And you can see that if you actually go to the YouTube website and play any video, this is sort of what appears in the URL address bar. But that's not valid because there's no ID here. This just ends with the equal sign. And what we really want is the ID after that. So now we want to add in what the user typed. And what they typed is in the ID field that we named appropriately. And the text property contains the text they typed. So this here will create a full URL by combining these two pieces of text and then assign it to the URL property of the YouTube player, which will then display the video. And that's it. That's the extent of our simple app with its one line of code. And now we can actually click the Run button. And this will build our project and launch it, theoretically, if it doesn't hang up. I sometimes get a port problem on my webinar account, so let's see if running it again gets around that. And it did. That's good. So we can see here our web app is now running. You can see the ID field is really long. There's no way you'd have a video ID that is quite that long. But it's stretched like we wanted. The button stayed on the right-hand side of the page like we wanted. The player control didn't actually stretch to the whole thing, and it won't until there's an actual video in it. Right now it's just blank, so it stays at this default size. It has to have an actual video in order to show its new sizes. And let's see if I can actually type in a number here, or an ID, or if I'm gonna get it wrong and have to copy and paste it. Let's see if that works. Oh, it did. Good. And this is a video that I did, of course, a short video also showing you how you can make a very simple web app using Xojo. And you can see it now resized to fit the size of the web page itself. And there's a big play button in the middle of the video. Because assigning the URL property doesn't start playing the video. It just, essentially gets it all set up, and then you got to use the play button to start the video. And then it's got all the regular YouTube controls that you can use however you typically use them. And then you can close the tab when you're done with your testing and go back to Xojo, and you can stop the debugger to get back to your project and continue working on it. One question I had earlier is, if you're looking at the properties for the web page itself, there's a switch here that says implicit instance, and it's on right now. You can flip it to off. And the question was, what is this property for? And there's lots of properties. You can definitely go to the user guide, open up the topic for web page, and there'll be a list of all the properties and their descriptions you can click on to see how they might work. Implicit instance allows you to refer to the page by its name that you see in the inspector, so player page. So if you had multiple pages, you could actually just display this one by calling playerpage.show, for example. If implicit instance is off, then you can't do that. You have to create an instance manually using the new keyword like you would with classes. If you're unfamiliar with class and that stuff, that's a little bit more advanced. There are other videos on object-oriented programming and other topics like that if you're interested. So what's next? Well, if you weren't following along, you can grab Xojo, xojo.com/download, and give it a try. The current version is 2018 release 4. And you can subscribe to the Xojo YouTube channel, youtube.com/goxojo, and then you'll get notified when any new videos are posted. There's hundreds up there right now. If you want to dive into learning more about programming in general and Xojo, you can grab our free Introduction to Programming book, xojo.com/learn. And after you do the quick start, there is a companion tutorial also available in the documentation here, which you can go through. It's a bit longer than the quick start with a little bit more code, so you might want to check that out. And of course, you can go to the Xojo user community forum to ask questions and maybe even answer questions if you get more experienced. But it's a great place to hang out. And a few other links here. Of course, the main docs are at docs.xojo.com. I mentioned the web tutorial. And then the full user guide is available here. And the full category of web topics can be found here as well. And that'll give you a big, long list of web-related things that you might want to look through if you're interested in web development. All right, I can be reached via email at paul@xojo.com. Super easy to remember, I hope. And of course, on Twitter, I'm at Lefevre. That's probably less easy to remember and maybe spell for some people. Or at Xojo. So if you have questions on Xojo in general, web apps, this video, or any video, be sure to get in touch. Thanks for watching. Have a great day, everyone.